Attorney Amihan April Alcazar, sa lahat ng bumubuo ng The Education Channel at sa ating mga manunood, magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Una sa lahat, nais kong batiin si Attorney April para sa paglulunsad ng kanyang kahangahangang proyektong The Education Channel. Mahalaga ang episode natin ngayong gabi dahil ito ang premier broadcast dito sa ating bansa. Sa pamamagitan ng programang ito, hindi lamang tayo naghahatid ng edukasyon sa mga mag-aaral ng bansa. Tinatalakay din natin ang mahalagang usapin. Ngayong gabi ay tatalakayin natin ang estado ng edukasyon sa bansa na humaharap sa matinding hamon na dulot ng COVID-19. Para sa akin, hindi lamang ang pagpapatuloy ng edukasyon ang dapat nating tutukan sa new o better normal. Mahalaga ring talakayin natin kung paano nating iaangat ang kalidad ng edukasyon sa bansa. Paano ba magiging mas matatag ang sektor ng edukasyon sa harap ng mga krisis na tulad ng kinakaharap natin? Samahan po natin si Attorney April sa pagtalakay at pagsuri ng mga usaping ito. Bilang chairman ng Senate Committee on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, ako po ay inyong katawang sa ating pagsisikap na iangat ang kalidad ng ating edukasyon. Maraming salamat at magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Stay safe. Si Attorney April para sa paglulunsad ng kanyang kahangahangang proyektong The Education Channel.
Everyone, good evening to all of you, especially to our viewers here and abroad.
In all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we hope that you'll be able to join us in our news Harsh Focus tayo na tonight is just more.
Good evening. It's Tuesday again. This is Attorney Amihan April M. Alcazar welcoming you to the Career Assistance Program, airing every Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. So this is your program if you're interested to further your skills, training, and development in your career and beyond. Whether you're a student, a new graduate, or already in the workplace environment, Career Assistance Program will help you advance in your career. So we'll be right back with our feature for tonight's episode. For tonight, I'll be discussing about the non-government organization Teachers Helping Teachers and what they have been doing in the Philippines insofar as training teachers are concerned. So tonight's topic is going to be educational literacy and contextual learning theory for English language learning. So why is it important to know about contextual learning theory? Well, it's going to help us improve our English language proficiency. So this lecture was delivered last year at the University of the Philippines, Cebu, in preparation for contextual learning immersive experiences for the students. So let's define first what is functional literacy. Well, it was a term that was initially defined by the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization by William S. Gray in his book, The Teaching of Reading and Writing, which defines the training of adults to meet independently the reading and writing demands placed on them. That is functional literacy theory. Then the contextual learning, functional literacy, meaning it is two concepts put together. So there's a construction or constructivist theory of learning and teaching. So we will form together what is contextual learning in connection with functional literacy. Learning takes place, according to this philosophy, when teachers are able to present information in such a way that students learn based on their own experiences, meaning they're going to draw upon their own life experiences in order to understand what is happening, what is being taught, and eventually learn from what is being taught. What are the characteristics of contextual learning? So let's discuss them one by one. So first is that it emphasizes problem solving. So in a real life situation, we always face issues, concerns, and problems. So we need to identify what is our concern when we are trying to understand a particular situation. Second, we recognize that teaching and learning need to occur in multiple contexts. So it's different when we learn from the classroom, it's different when we learn from home, it's different when we learn in a social situation. So it means that in all of these contexts, teaching informally or formally is taking place, as well as learning formally or informally is simultaneously taking place. Third is that as teachers, there is a need to assist students in learning to monitor their learning, and so they should become self-regulated or independent learners. So the teacher, more than just a font of knowledge, is really a facilitator for the learning of students. Fourth is that we must anchor teaching in the life context of the students. So there's no need to discuss about necessarily alien or foreign topics. Instead, we have to adapt it to what is the context in the Philippines. Then we need to encourage students to learn from each other, so what we call peer teaching and learning. So those of the students who are of the same chronological age, they can be mirrors of each other. There's social interaction between them, and from that engagement comes learning. Then we must employ authentic assessment, meaning from what we understand, we are able to determine whether we are achieving the objective of our communication. Then, what are the possible contextual learning experiences? So I will discuss each one of that, and in the following episodes of Career Assistance Program, we will delve deeper by featuring some of these possible experiences. So first, let's begin with internship. So almost all of our academic programs have an internship, on-the-job training, or practicum as part of the academic requirements before graduation. The hours may vary as to the requirements, but the objective is to apply what we have learned conceptually in the classroom or in school to the practical application that we find in a workplace environment. So therefore, it is practicable to apply contextual learning theory when we are undertaking our internship, on-the-job training, or practical. The second type of possible experience is that of service learning. Usually, this is applied to education where it is found that in a laboratory classroom or a real life classroom where a student has the possibility to become a teacher aide, that learning can take place. And so we are actually extending our service together with the teachers in the classroom in order to learn how we will eventually become teachers in the future. The third type of experience could be the study abroad program. So there are many types of study abroad programs, but the most common is that it is a combination of immersive experience, both in an academic setting or in a school, and second, in a practical or experiential learning environment. For example, in a workplace environment, that is applicable to the particular academic program, such as for hospitality management, maybe a hotel, a resort, or a restaurant. Then, when you talk about functional literacy and combining it with contextual learning, functional literacy usually applies when we are already learners during the time that we become adults. So that is over 18 years of age. But contextual learning normally happens when we are children, because there is as yet no formal way by which we are actually learning. Instead, we are taking on the learning as a sponge would through osmosis. However, when we combine these two theories, what are the perspectives that we are actually going to be applying? So first is we talk about situated cognition. So we understand that all learning is actually applied knowledge, that whatever it is that we actually learn, whether we are going to actually apply it at the moment that we learn it or in the future, it gets stored in our cognition or in our brains. So therefore, we know that regardless of what we learn, it doesn't have to be immediately usable, but it can be stored and be applied in the future. Second, when we have social cognition, we know that through interaction with human beings or other individuals, we are able to actually learn. So that is what differentiates human beings with other animals, because we can utilize our communication skills in order to learn. Third is distributed cognition. So it means that it is not only through the engagement of other human beings or in the situations that we find ourselves that we are actually imbibing knowledge, but through the continually shaped by other people and things outside the individual that we're actually learning. So there's an interaction among our environment that provides us with the learning. So that is distributed cognition. Then what are the benefits that we are actually going to acquire when we apply this to language learning? So I mentioned about the use of these theories in order to improve one's proficiency in the English language. Why? Because English language is utilized as the medium of instruction for higher and technical education, as well as the language of scholarship and the international language. So there are many benefits that could be derived from increasing your English language proficiency. So we know that both direct instruction, meaning what is being taught to you in school in the form of grammar or writing, speaking, or listening, is going to be melded and going to be complementary for these constructivist theories in order to be compatible and effective in the achieving of your learning goals, which is to improve your English language proficiency. And we know that once you increase your efforts in order to increase your language proficiency, it is directly correlated to the aptitude that is being increased. So this theory is definitely opposed to the other theory that aptitude is constant or is unchangeable. Instead, we say that if you apply a lot of efforts, then you should expect that your proficiency will increase. Therefore, when we are striving for learning goals, it motivates the individuals to engage in an activity and gets him to commit to the learning itself, because he knows that his efforts will actually result into better future and better outcomes for him. Then when we talk about children, because we're saying that contextual learning usually occurs when a person is a child, but of course we could also apply it during the adult learning years. But usually children learn standard values and knowledge by engaging with society. And then you know how children are. They're very persistent in asking questions and then accepting challenges. They want to question why, because they haven't yet found what the solution is to the questions that they have in mind. So it's not immediately apparent to them what is the actual solution. So other learning processes besides the question to the challenges in order to find solution will be explaining concepts. So it'll be usually experiences in the classroom or in school, justifying the reasoning, because if we have a question, we want to find out what is the most plausible or logical explanation, and of course, seeking information through information sharing and information dissemination. So therefore, learning is a social process. So there's a lot of people who interact and engage in order to undertake the learning, which requires social and cultural factors to be considered during instructional planning. So if we are talking about the Philippine educational system and the context of the Philippines, so those are the social and cultural traits that will shape the kind of learning that could be had in the Philippine setting. So the social nature of learning drives the determination of the learning goals. So depending on what the value system is of our society, then learning is going to take place based on those value system of our society. When we talk about knowledge and learning, so those are two distinct entities. When you have knowledge, it is static. It may change, but learning is constantly evolving, meaning it is subject to a lot of physical and social context. So there's engagement. You start with the knowledge and then you try to test it out in the social context to see the plausibility or the applicability of the kind of knowledge, and then it transforms into learning for the people who are able to engage in that kind of social interaction. The range of settings where learning takes place, contrary to the popular belief, is that learning is not going to be a monopoly of the school. Instead, it could be had at home. And so now when we find ourselves in the pandemic and many children are actually home-based, it doesn't mean that their learning stops. Instead, the learning will take place within the setting of the home. Of course, the most common way to learn is through the community. When we learn about societal values, when we learn about cultural factors, these are based in the community. And of course, once we finish our school, which is the usual idea of a setting where learning takes place, we go to the workplace environment. It doesn't mean that when we're already working that no learning takes place. So in the form of skills and training, that is also learning in the workplace. So the choice depends on the purpose of the instruction and the intended learning goals. The settings that we're going to be utilizing depends on what the outcome needs to be. When we have knowledge, it is actually distinct for each individual. So even if we're reading one particular book, the knowledge that is being acquired by each person depends on the ability of the person and the physical and symbolic task that is in mind of the person, and not merely only belonging to him, because it may be that this task is one that was given as an assignment by the teacher for the whole class, or it's a standard that was implemented by the regulatory agency, the Commission on Higher Education. So it doesn't belong only to the person who is learning, yet it belongs to the community. So since people are an integral part of the learning process, then there is a need to share knowledge and tasks. So knowledge is not a monopoly of any one individual, and learning certainly cannot be had in a vacuum without interaction with other people sharing knowledge and different tasks. So one of the main goals of contextual learning is to develop an authentic task to assess performance. So which means that when we're doing contextual learning, the task that we are assigning to our students and learnings is one that is real. It is not just a simulation or a make believe or a made up task. Because eventually, after the task has been performed by the individual, what we're expecting is that there's going to be a result, and based on the result, we can evaluate whether it's good or bad or neither. Then, when we talk about creating an assessment, so it's not enough that you have knowledge and then you've learned about something. You also have to assess or evaluate what is the value of this learning. So it helps guide the teacher. So the teacher is going to replicate the real world experiences and make necessary inclusive design decision, means that the teacher is thinking there is some practical application that is to be had from what we have learned in class. So if we learn about photosynthesis in science, then we know that photosynthesis is necessary for the growth of plants. And so if you were a gardener, you know that the plants will have to undergo photosynthesis. So that is an example of a practical application of a concept that was knowledge and learned within the classroom setting. So contextual learning can be used as a formative assessment, meaning a fundamental assessment tool that can help give educators a stronger profile on how the intended learning goals, standards, and benchmarks fit the curriculum. So when one is designing a particular curriculum or intended academic program, and of course cascading it to the curriculum, the syllabus, and the eventual tasks and assignments that should be done by the students. So you know that when you have this contextual learning theory, you're going to be assigning authentic tasks. And so the evaluation of students based on the outcomes that they're able to deliver as performance is going to be much more relevant and responsive based on the intended learning goals that has been set by the teacher. Then lastly, it is essential to establish and align the intended learning goals of the contextual task at the beginning to a shared understanding of what success looks like. That's what we call about outcomes-based education, meaning we're actually looking at what particular skill or performed task is going to be made by the student. And so if they're able to accomplish that, then we know that we have been a success. And if not yet, the intended outcome has been delivered by the students, and you know that there are gaps and deficiencies that have to be filled. And therefore, we will backtrack and see if remediation or remedial action or intervention will have to be done so that there is a better chance of success to be had the next time that the student performs the task again. So lastly, when we talk about contextual learning related to functional literacy, we can illustrate it to the GASP concept wheel. So here it looks like a color wheel because there are actually going to be 6 parts of this concept wheel. Okay, so first we have to talk about the goals. We were talking about the intended learning goals. So what are our learning goals? That's the first question that needs to be answered before you can determine what the result is, because if you don't know what the goal is, then you certainly can't know what the result is going to be. Then the next is when we're assigning the task to the student, we have to determine, okay, so what role or responsibility is the student going to be actually performing? So he needs to understand that there are certain steps that need to be undertaken so that he can perform his role significantly. Okay. Of course, we have to look at A. For what audience is this task supposed to be done? Is it merely to satisfy the requirement of this classroom learning environment, and so the audience is the teacher? Or is there a community to whom the result is going to be intended for, and so they are the beneficiary? So we have to determine who is the audience of what we are actually accomplishing in terms of the goal. Okay. Then the next is we find ourselves, of course, in that particular situation. So this is where the difference of contextual learning is. You have to determine what is the actual situation that we find ourselves in. So we have to determine what is this particular situation. We discern, is it applicable, our goal, or our audience or our role, is it applicable in this particular situation? Then we look at the product. So the product is like the end goal, right? So are we able to actually have an outcome which is like the product? So it could be variably the product or the outcome. Okay. And then of course, when we talk about the standards, so after you have already the outcome, you have to assess, you have to evaluate, are we a success or a failure? So therefore, what we're actually doing is that we're putting a standard and saying that, well, if you're able to achieve this level of product or outcome, then you would be considered as very successful, mildly successful, for example, or least successful, or you may be considered as a failure. So when we use this gas concept wheel, we would have like gone through the whole concept of contextual learning and then apply it to the functional literacy and more specifically to English language learning so that we will become more proficient. So in the next episodes, what I will be doing is that I will be delving deep into the kind of contextual learning experiences that are actually necessary for the learning of students to take place and which are recommended to be immersive and experiential. Internships, practice or service learning, and study abroad programs. So, till next time, so we'll be right back.
Mental health, fifth industrial revolution, and digital collaboration.
Session for today. Again, I'd like to welcome as well all the guests coming from the industry, the education. So since last year, the 196 organizations and leaders, right, they made the jumps from 1 to 2, right, or even 3. Can you imagine the number of people are going through mental health issues? So that's how will we do this? So we research, that there are certain things that have already been implemented as a way to inform as well other leaders, in the other agencies. I love this, coming from the Department of Trade and Industry. They're saying that when the nation develops its people, the people develop. So thank you for today. God bless you. Thank you so much.
And we're happy that for the second quarter of 2021, we were able to among our workers to go out, especially those who have not been vaccinated yet. Overseas po, alam naman po natin na the pandemic has an impact. We speak about 2 million na rin po yung atin pong nare-reach.
So these are the things that we would like to invite everyone. If these are very important to you, then
So I hope that you enjoyed tonight's feature. Definitely, we were discussing about the contextual learning theories applied to functional literacy and the improvement in our proficiency in English language, as well as the SFI Career Center and the need for a national manpower and skills training development program in order to advance our career development in the Philippines. So I hope that you've really learned so much from our Career Assistance Program episode for tonight. So this attorney Amian April M. Alcazar, your host, and we'll see you again every Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. So you may follow, subscribe, and like us in all our social media platforms. So Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And we hope to see you again very soon. So stay safe, everyone. Until next Tuesday, thank you and good night.